Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brief introductory session on how to fly the new P180 from FlightFX. For those of you not familiar with this new product offering, this is the P180. It is a unique twin turboprop transport aircraft, executive class. Seats about 9 comfortably. As you can see, it's unique because of a twin turboprop configuration that's in a pusher setup. So those are two PT6As rated at 850 horsepower each, um, and three sets of lifting surfaces. Those are not canards, they're called foreplanes. The swept-back T-tail mounted very high, and of course the highly loaded and very short wings. That's because the torpedo-shaped body is very efficient at adding to the lifting capability of the aircraft. So all of that allows for a very tight, very compact design. And it certainly draws some unique looks, obviously, has a lot of ramp appeal that way. So let's just jump right back into the cockpit. Okay, here's the new tablet from FlightFX. There's a couple of new features. If you're familiar with the VAMS tablet from their very popular VisionJet product, it's got additional features on top of what you expect to find in the VAMS tablet. But one of the first things everyone probably is asking is, well, it's mounted to the left. What if I want it to disappear? That's easy enough to do. There's the close point right there, those little white stickers. You click on that, and where did it go? Well, it's not over there, but it's actually mounted on this very thin map compartment right underneath the autopilot panel. And there it is. It's sticking out. You can see it. So just click on that, and it magically reappears on the quick release suction pad over there. All right, couple of things to note. This is new to the tablet. You've now got a speed readout and current conditions based on your position icons on the home page of the tablet. Navigraph is available. So for folks who have a Navigraph subscription, you can certainly take advantage of your subscription and gain access to all of the useful things that come with a Navigraph subscription, such as the charts, all of the stars, SIDS, the taxi. You can call up the weather and the info. This is a standard Navigraph plugin for that purpose. To exit the Navigraph plugin, just simply hit the home key at the bottom of the tablet. This is a moving map display based on OpenStreetMaps. It will update as the aircraft is maneuvering, so that is useful for folks who like to have a moving map capability to track where they are. Sorry about that. The settings contains all of the standard features that you've come to expect of the VAMS tablet, plus some new ones. You've probably seen by now some of the streamers who have previewed the P180 in detail. There were at least two by the time of this recording. So be sure to check out Two Tone Murphy and Blue Games. They both had previews in the last 2 days with the P180, and they did a lot of detailed walkarounds and things that really showcase the great work that went into this product. So really briefly, you can set your settings state if you're in a hurry, cold and dark all the way to ready for takeoff. You can manipulate all the external components of the aircraft, put on chocks, engine covers, etc. Open and close the 2 doors. This is new to FlightFX. This tablet, this is a cabin configuration. You can change the cabin config to reflect an executive role, a working aircraft. You can turn on some clutter for personal touches. They now offer a food service, so that's pretty cool. I encourage folks to check that out in their spare time, slew back into the cabin. Um, the luggage type is familiar from the old VAMS tablet. Open up the luggage door. You can choose the graphical appearance of what's being carried in the baggage bay. This is the section that is going to be of a lot of use to you who want to just get up and flying. We'll talk about all of these in turn, but for those who would like to have complete and 100% realism, basically up the difficulty level of flying this aircraft, the developers have created a realism section around power plant management. So if you clear disable engine damage, meaning that you turn on engine damage model, if you don't properly manage the power plant correctly, you'll see a reflection of that as these indicators will start to degrade. Obviously, if they degrade to the point where the aircraft is unflyable, well, that's no fun. So if that's the case and you want to just keep going, simply click the repair engines button and you'll be back in business. We'll talk about the automatic steering mode in a moment. And of course, we have a great work by Boris of Boris Soundworks, who added active noise reduction in the headphones. So even though this aircraft is well insulated and the PT-6As are mounted well far back aft, you'll still hear it in the cockpit and in the cabin. And so we can turn on active noise reduction later for pilot comfort. All right. Um, Let me just get the yoke out of the way, and we'll talk briefly about where things are in the cockpit. Everything is up front and in the center console, so that's good. There's really no controls up here, no controls to the sides, so nothing to worry about in that regard. Starting from the top, autopilot control panel. This should be pretty familiar looking for most folks. We'll talk about the autopilot disconnection setting in a few moments. Three flight displays, two primary, one on pilot and command side, one on the co-pilot side, one multifunction display in the center. This is the master warning and caution panel. We'll be living out of that a lot because a lot of the telltales and the indicators will be following along to get the aircraft up and running. Radio readout panel over there, comms panel, channels over there. Starting from left to right, this is mostly environmental, cooling, cabin fans, etc. This is the bleed air control for pressurization. Hydraulic pressure, we'll talk about that. It's conveniently and instinctively next to the landing gear. This is one of two sets of control of lighting on the aircraft. In this case, this controls the taxi and external lighting. Pitot heat. So this is all the this is all the icing and heating controls for the propellers, wing surfaces, and the pitot heat. This is the testing knob. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I encourage folks to check that out in their spare time. All of this is the pressurization controls all the way to the right. Here at the top part of the center console is the electricals, your batteries, generators, avionics on off. This is the fuel panel. Immediately below that, fuel valves 1 and 2, left-right pumps, cross feeds. This is your igniter and engine control panel, which contains both starters, the igniters, oil cooling. These are propeller controls associated with managing the feathering, prop sync, which is pretty cool, but requires a little bit of a deft touch on the RPM or condition levers. The usual power quadrant. These are the engine power levers. These are the propeller condition levers. This flaps, of course. This is the other set of lighting panels. This has to do with both external. You've got the position recognition, anti-collision, as well as seatbelt passenger safety and the ice detection wing light. Down here at the bottom, very familiar. Yes, the P180 is equipped with a Proline 21. It is customized, however. There's some unique displays that were customized for the P180 when it was manufactured, and so the developers have reflected that accordingly. And down here is some additional trim controls, which we are going to talk about as well because it's directly tied to the autopilot operation. All right, well, that's the walkthrough. So let's get started. Probably the easiest way to get things going is to switch on the battery. Everything comes alive at that point. Master this. The multifunction display, caution and warning. We've got a whole bunch of them. Next thing we need to do is just flip the avionics switch bus all the way up. And that way all the avionics come on because we need access to the Proline 21. We're going to do a very quick run through of a Proline 21. For those of you who are not used to this flight management system, that's okay. I encourage you to look for a Proline 21 tutorial if you want to get more accustomed to navigating and managing the various pages and functions of this flight management system. By no means is this going to be a comprehensive review. It's just simply a quick run through to get it initialized and to get the performance numbers built into the initialization of the aircraft so that we have a proper takeoff speeds and other items so that the aircraft is fully optimized for takeoff. First things first, you're going to live using the line skip keys, which correspond to a readout on the main display with an arrow. So if it says position init and it's pointing this way and you want to enable that, you're going to just hit the line skip key next to it. So that's an example. But what we're going to do first is we're going to initialize the position. So we're going to go back to position init. Here's our position as detected by GPS. What we're going to do is we're going to click that line skip key and drop it into the set position to say, yep, that's where I am. And position init is clear. We're good to go. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some departure arrivals. We are here at Providence Airport in lovely Little Rhode Island. For instructional purposes, I've set fairly benign weather conditions. For the most part, it is clear, very little wind, so we'll just take advantage of that. Runway 23 is off to our 4 or 5 o'clock, just around the corner. So we'll just set runway 23 as our departure. We'll go to the performance page and we'll set takeoff information. You can easily obtain some of that right here by using the present position weather readout. As you can see, it's pretty negligible, 356 at 2. That's effectively almost no wind, but we'll set that anyway. 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius. And the QNH is blank. So let's do this. 356 at 2. Really what you can do is just set 360 at 0. It's pretty much going to be the same from an effective wind effect. 59 degrees or 15 degrees Celsius. Hit that. We'll leave it at 2992. We've already set the runway previously, so that's good to go. One more thing. We're going to go back to the performance initialization page. Cruise altitude, it's going to be a VFR flight. For instructional purposes, I set a flight to Provincetown, Kilo Papa Victor Charlie, from Providence Airport, which is Kilo Papa Victor Delta. And that would be approximately 5,500 feet according to the rules. So we need to set the cruise altitude. So set 5500, hit enter. And cargo, you can get your cargo rating, which you probably set, or you should have set, when you executed the weight and balance entry. And there's your weighting, and we're actually going to add some fuel, so we'll just pretend that we got to top off. We don't need a full load today. We just need about 85%. That's more than enough. And we're going to just add, actually, we're going to zero it all out. We're going to give it a full bag of gas, 980 pounds. So sensed fuel is good. It adjusted accordingly. 980 for cargo. Execute. Now we can go to takeoff. We have weights. We have environmental. We know the runway. We are going to use a takeoff using mid flaps. There's your calculated V speed. Rotate at 110. And we're going to send that. Turn blue. We sent it to the PFD. There it is. Let me just jump straight there. Visa bar at 110. While we're here, we'll just set a takeoff altitude using the Alt Cell dial. That'll give us a target for flight level change, and verified barometric pressure is identical. Okay, very good. So we're good to go. So we'll just set this to the flight plan. There it is, KPVD to KPVC, and we're good to go. All right. A lot of warning lights. How to read at a very high level EIS indications. Red is an immediate action situation. You should immediately take a look and see whether that's a benign situation, which it is in this case because the engines are cold and dark. So RPM being red, NG being red is not surprising. The engines are cold. They're not started. Yellow is not necessarily a bad thing. In the flight manual, the P180 flight manual basically states that yellow is transitory. It is, however, something that you should immediately assess and figure out whether that's trending towards a red or whether it's just some metric that's in transit. So, for example, if you're coming out of 0% RPM and you're somewhere in the 600s, it's going to be showing a yellow because it's trending either downwards or it's trending upwards. So just keep an eye on it, but yellow is not necessarily a bad situation. Okay. With that being said, let's go work through the caution and warning to get the aircraft started. We've already got avionics switch on. We are going to put on the fuel valves, which is the left fuel valve closed, right fuel valve closed. So, sorry, the fuel firewall is what it's referring to. So that's what it is, right fuel firewall closed. So open both these red switches on the fuel side, on the fuel part of the console. That extinguishes both of those. We'll still have a whole bunch of other things. Next is to bring the fuel pumps on for the respective engine that you're planning to start. However, bring both propeller or condition levers into cutoff, which is all the way down. Leave the throttles at idle, and we'll just start with the right engine. We're going to turn on the fuel pump. That is a three-way switch, just like the avionics, so make sure it's all the way up. And this setting for the igniters and the engine start are all set correctly. So for the corresponding engine, the ignition should be in norm, which it is. And all you've got to do is bring up the right starter. Before we do that, once we turn on the starter, the EIS is going to start responding. There's going to be all sorts of indicators for the right engine spooling up. This is the NG percentage dial for the engines, these two sets. Once this engine, for the engine that's starting, you want it to pass 13%. Once that dial is past 13, bring the corresponding propeller lever into ground idle, which is marked accordingly on the slot right there, and leave it there. That's standard startup. Once it's in ground idle, it will stabilize and get up to operating speeds and RPMs, and you'll be good to go. All right, let's do this. Starter right. Passing 13. You can hear the engine coming up. And just to give folks, there's a view of the engine spinning up, coming up to operating RPM. There you go. Engine 1 successfully started. RPMs came up, NG came up. Again, white is not a bad thing. Yellow is not a bad thing. Fuel flow, oil pressure, oil temperature, all coming up. And the ITT, which should be below 750. Okay, we still got some cautions, but most of the right engine telltales disappeared. Right generator warning. Engine is stabilized. We can bring up the right generator and bring it online without taking a disparate load on the single battery. Okay. EPU drain suddenly popped up, but that's normal. So that's the switch right here, the black one over here on the electrical panel. So click that all the way up. Finally, let's bring left engine online. So again, we'll repeat the process. Left igniter is in norm. Firewall is open. We need to turn on the pump. Good to go. Starter. Passing 13. Bring it into ground idle. Okay. And you'll notice you saw the starter automatically disengaged once we had a successful light off. Clear the caution. All the left engine indicators went off, which is good. Reminder that the left generator can be brought online. Left engine looks stable, so we can bring up the left gen. Extinguishes the caution. That's good. All right, good. Successful startup. Next, clear the caution. You'll be doing that a lot, by the way. That way you can you can either leave it on until you've cleared as many cautions as you need to, or you can just clear it each time. Remaining cautions on the warning and caution panel. Warnings are in red, cautions are in yellow. That's how to read the alert panel. We still have stall heat fail, left and right pitot heat. Those three are all interrelated. We need to bring the left and right pitot heats on. Hydraulic press, we'll talk about that in pressure, we'll talk about that in a second. Auto feather. Auto feather is required during taxi. Taxi to takeoff, taxi during landing. It is disabled shortly after takeoff, and you can enable it after you land. We'll talk about some of the critical speeds to clean up after wheels up. But for now, to clear the auto feather, that's the auto feather switch right here. It is a three-way, so just click it to make sure it's all the way up. Extinguishes the auto feather. So auto feather is on. Now, for pressurization, bleed air left and right. That's it. That's all you really got to do. Let's talk about steering and taxiing this aircraft because we're almost there. And then we'll talk about the autopilot before we do anything else, and then we'll taxi. In order for the aircraft to steer, and this is pretty neat, the developers came up with this. It was pretty cool. I'm sorry, not the developers. The manufacturer came up with this unique design. I can't speak to why, but they did. So what you need to do is you're probably seeing this blinking indicator on the steering, indicating steer taxi on the primary flight display. What this aircraft does is it has two settings associated with steering capability, and it all has to do with the hydraulic pressure. If the hydraulic pressure isn't on, you're not going to be able to turn the nose wheel steering of the aircraft. It's simply just going to, if you release the parking brake, which is this lever right here, you're just going to roll forward. There's no steering at all. What needs to happen is you need to turn on the hydraulics, which is this switch here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, instinctively next to the landing gear. Let it come up to operating pressure. There's two sets of pressures, one for steering, one for steering during taxi, one for takeoff. Let's just clear this for a minute. If you wanted more realism, turn off automatic steering mode. That means you need to remember to turn on the hydraulics, and you need to press the steering mode button on the pilot yoke to set the appropriate setting. So steer taxi is what you want when you are taxiing around, because it gives the maximum turn capability to the front nose wheel. Once you are ready for takeoff, you hit steering mode again and you switch it to takeoff, and now you're limited, very limited in terms of the play or the travel of the nose wheel steering, which is what you want. You do not want to depart steering while you're taking off. That will result in a ground loop or something worse. So these two settings need to be in the appropriate mode, depending on what you want to do. If you just want to fly and you can't really be bothered with it, or you don't want to have to remember that, and that's fine. Uh, that's that's a perfectly valid gameplay decision. Just turn on the active steering mode, and the aircraft will take care of it for you. The display may or may not change, but it is just going to handle what you're doing and change the mode accordingly. No further intervention is required on your part. However, neither one of those settings, active mode or full manual, is going to work unless you have hydraulics on. So you're still obligated to remember to turn on hydraulics. Okay, that's that piece. We'll bring up position lights, put anti-collision in ground mode. We'll put on the recognition lights, put on passenger safety, which is the seatbelt sign, because we're about to start rolling. And the only other things that I want to talk about here real quick before we get to the hold short. This, again, as I mentioned earlier, is the trim controls, pitch and rudder. The pitch trim mode needs to be in primary. So let's see if I can get a better view of that console panel. Right. That is a three-way switch. It is already in primary. Needs to be in primary. That helps you with the electric trim on the aircraft if you're manually trimming. It also works in conjunction with this button on the autopilot panel. And let me see if I can get to the autopilot panel. There it is. Okay. This is a very tricky switch. You just got to make sure it's properly seated. If it's down, that's disconnected. AP is not going to work no matter what you do. If it's up, it's one of two settings to enable AP. The other setting is that pitch trim. The pitch trim must be in primary. This AP disconnect switch must be fully up in order for autopilot to enable when you hit master AP toggle and you want it to fly the aircraft. Tricky. Don't know why the manufacturer made it that way, but they did. So we're ready to go. Let's make sure we're going to turn on the automatic steering mode for instructional purposes, and we are going to release the parking brake at this point. Again, throttles are in idle. Throttles were in idle, so just gently bring it forward. Doesn't take a lot to get her going. And we'll just taxi on over here. There's the throat to 2-3, and then the rest of the airport is to the right, so we're just going to go straight over here to the hold short. Viewers will have to excuse the fact that I'm choosing not to interact with ATC. I'm sure you don't mind. The ATC can get pretty verbose at times, and not to mention I have a great FAA phraseology mod, which makes it even more verbose, but accurate. So we're at 2-3. I'm just holding the spade button down to hold the brakes in place. Do a quick clear. Nobody's coming, nobody's going visually. We'll get going. We're going to bring the flaps down. You're going to hear it. Visual confirmation. Flaps are at mid. There are two positions, mid and down. Most conventional takeoffs with the aircraft, not asking for full high performance, are made in mid flap position. Okay, we'll take 2-3, and we'll hold here for a minute. Gonna bring that down. I am going to set parking brake for a second. last thing that we want to talk about. You've set a V speed, but once you take off, there's a couple of speeds that you should be aware of. I'm going to show you something pretty neat. If you watch the previews by Blue Games and Two Tone, I believe they showed this. We're going to bring the taxi lights out first. And you heard that whine. Yep, there it is. It's a little compartment directly in front of the nose gear. And that's currently taxi lights, very low intensity, relatively speaking. We're going to bring up the high intensity, and if you watched out of the corner of your eye, you probably saw the emissive reflect briefly on the asphalt. So this compartment that houses the landing and taxi lights is in the way. It's directly in the airflow of the aircraft. And so one of the first things you want to do after takeoff, rotate, and you've stabilized a bit in the climb out is to immediately retract this. This is rated for below 160 knots. So that's one thing that you should do. I mentioned auto feather earlier. Auto feather is really only used during taxi. Auto feather can be disabled at any time, but it should be done shortly after takeoff, but it must be done above 150 knots. So landing lights, taxi lights retracted below 160, auto feather above 150. Flaps must come up at below 170, and gear must come up below 180. Those are your magic numbers. They're all within 10 nautical. They're all within 10 knots increment, so it's sort of easy to remember. But the easiest way is to start auto feather, landing gear, taxi lights, and then flaps, then gear. Okay, we'll get started. Last step: clear the master warning and caution. Pitot heat is coming on, both sides. That clears the master warning and caution. Clear it one more time. Okay, we're ready to roll. Here we go. Releasing parking brake. Bring your RPMs or your propeller condition levers all the way full forward before you do anything else. You must bring all of it full forward, otherwise you'll damage the engine. Again, you're seeing propeller RPM warnings in yellow. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just in transit. It's going to change as we apply power. And so you saw it turn green. Propeller and ITT power, torque and ITT are still in the green. Looking for around 111 knots according to the VR bug. The P180 is going to feel like a long pull, folks. And it is a long pull because the rear undercarriage or the rear landing gear is set very far back. You can see that it's almost all the way back in the aircraft. So when you pull pitch, it's going to feel like a long pull because it is. So we've got all of that done. I'm going to just turn on autopilot real quick and do a bit of cleanup. We're going to bring the landing and taxi lights retracted all the way. AP successfully engaged. We're in a slight bank. That's okay. And we're going to turn off auto feather. Climb out is best done around 160. And we'll just turn on heading mode. And we're going to turn east towards Provincetown. Should be good for now. Everything's in the green on the engine instrumentation systems. You'll notice two arrows on the engine power display. Um, the hollow one is the torque. That's what most folks are used to managing in a normally aspirated engine. Meaning that's the sheer amount of power that's being output by the aircraft in terms of torque. The solid arrow is something that folks need to keep an eye on and be aware of. That has to do with your ITT, inter-turbine temperatures, and you want to keep those in the green. The hotter you run the aircraft and you run it into the red, the more abuse the engines are taking, and subsequently, if you turned on engine power plant realism for the damage model, you're going to see a degradation in the engine health readouts over there on the tablet. And that, folks, is cold and dark start, taxi and takeoff. I'll try and do a separate video at some point to do some of the landing. But for now, I think this is pretty good. This should be enough to get folks up and running and started and enjoying the aircraft. So please keep an eye out for some future videos on the P180. Thanks and have a great day.